The time has expired. Senator Fawcett.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I do rise, as I have done on multiple occasions, to talk about shipbuilding in South Australia, and specifically, in this case, on submarines. I'd like to go to the wording of this MPI, which talks about design and build, and yet the clip we just had played emphasised the build. And I just want to talk about design for a minute. The three areas I want to talk about: the design, the build and the vital shipbuilding capability. First off, in terms of design, one of the things I had the privilege of doing in 2012 was travelling with a bipartisan committee to France, or in fact to Spain, to Germany, and two of the committee went to France as well, the UK and the US, looking at submarines and the potential for Australia to build future submarine. One of the things that became very clear was there were two aspects of design that we needed to be very much aware of. Firstly, that Australia does not have the capacity to design a submarine from scratch as a unique Australian design. Whichever nation we choose to partner with, we will need a design partner. That was the clear message that came through to the delegation from each of the nations, including those who didn't have any skin in the game, for example the UK and US. So whether we ended up going for a design that originated in Germany, in Japan, in Spain, in France, in Sweden, the reality is that the design will be a shared effort. In terms of numbers, in terms of the capacity, we just do not have the base here in Australia to design from scratch a submarine without taking on completely unacceptable levels of risk. So that's the first point about design. We will have a design partner, just as we did with the Collins, where it was Cockham's. We will have a design partner. And so the engagement of potential design partners is not unusual, and we have had people from multiple nations coming through South Australia looking at aspects of our defence industry and our defence needs with that in mind. The second thing is that Australia must have the understanding of the design. My whole professional career prior to politics was involved in the support, the certification, the testing of defence material, and if there is one thing that I can bring to this Senate is a deep understanding of the fact that if we want to be a sovereign nation with capability to own, deploy effectively and maintain defence equipment, we must understand the design. Now, the way we do that will vary. In some cases, it will be a case of completely developing and owning a design here. In other cases, it will be a transfer of IP from other nations. In some cases, it will involve us sending engineers to work deeply embedded with manufacturers and other militaries overseas. But whichever mechanism we put in place, it is imperative that we understand the design in terms of making sure we can sustain the equipment through its life, that we can repair the equipment. We cannot ever afford to be completely dependent upon another nation, because I can point to numerous examples, particularly in the aerospace world, which has been my background, of where even our most trusted allies, at times where they are under pressure, have not had the capacity to provide, in some cases, spare parts, in other cases design effort, or even updating of systems that we've required to meet requirements we have in terms of new threats or operating environments. I can also point to cases where we have saved considerable money and developed more effective and capable systems by having an Indigenous design and certification capability for our weapon systems, so that we can either be smarter about how we repair them or we can have the option to modify to meet new threats or environments. And they have proven to be very capable in joint exercises then against the parent service, in some cases the US, where those two capabilities have exercised together. Secondly, in terms of build, one of the things we learnt during this delegation was that there are a range of options for build, many of which come around the risk in terms of quality and therefore the safety and effectiveness of the system, and risk in terms of cost and schedule. One of the consistent messages that came through to the committee was that the preferred avenue for most of the vendors was to look at an option whereby The first couple of boats, particularly if you're going to build a number of boats in flights, that the first flight of boats would be built in the country of origin of the design, such that the workforce, whether they be manufacturing and production workforce or whether they be the engineering workforce, have the opportunity to train with, to learn, to get the hands-on experience of the build of that boat. And then that company would work with Australia at our manufacturing facility, which both the Coalition and Labor have identified would be South Australia, to then actually look to build the rest of the flights of boat in Australia. That achieves a number of things. It achieves a risk reduction in terms of making sure that we have the right skills, the right competence in place to build the boats. It achieves an effective transfer of IP and knowledge, not only for the remainder of the build, but importantly, it establishes the infrastructure and the engineering know-how to support the fleet of boats through their life, and if needs be, rather than a refresh program or a service life extension, to adopt the model that some countries adopt, which is you essentially scrap and rebuild, so you continue the production line, you continue the upgrade cycle for those vessels. To the last part about the shipbuilding capability and the claims of destroying that, it goes to the issue of the valley of death and losing the investment that we've had. I just merely lay on the table again the facts that I've laid out in this place a number of times before, that we are at the moment just past the peak of workforce for the Air Warfare Destroyer program. So we're now in 2014. The Air Warfare Destroyer decision to build at ASC was made in 2005. The decision to award the design to Navantia was made in 2007, which means that if we wanted a follow-on surface ship to sustain the investment we have in skills and infrastructure there at shipyards in South Australia, as well as Victoria and Forjax in New South Wales, that decision would have had to have been made at least 6, 7, possibly 8 years ago in order for that work to continue. So the way this government is looking to achieve economies of scale, to get the productivity to where we want it to be and to sustain our vital and strategic shipbuilding capability, is to say we're now in government, we have been for almost a year. We can't make a decision that will have a completely new design of ship being built in a year's time, but what we can do is to commit to do the engineering work to look at how we can use the investment we have in the design knowledge around the Air Warfare Destroyer hull, to commit to do the engineering work to see whether we can integrate the systems we have with both the CEA radar and the Saab 9LV combat system, both produced here in Australia, and on the basis of that engineering risk reduction work, to then look at extending the build program for hulls of the same design as the Air Warfare Destroyer, which will become the future frigate. That means that at very little risk and capitalising on the already made investment in skills and infrastructure, we can continue to build hull blocks which will get rid of the concerns around Valley of Death. And when the Air Warfare Destroyer program is complete in terms of the more complex side of it, which is the fit-out of the combat systems, in Air Warfare Destroyer's case the Aegis system, we can then roll on to both the assembly of the hull blocks and the integration of the CEA radar and 9LV system. So far from destroying Australia's strategic vital shipbuilding capability, the Coalition is in fact putting in place concrete and funded steps to maintain this capability, which for all the reasons I've outlined before is vital to us having not only the jobs in South Australia but importantly the sovereign capability to own and effectively employ defence assets.